The sun was sinking behind the jagged cliffs, casting long shadows across the abandoned outpost. Jack Carter tightened the last bolt on the comms tower, his hands numb from the cold evening wind. He had been sent here alone to repair the system. A boring but necessary job. The outpost had been empty for years. Ever since the mining company pulled out, no one lived here now, at least. That's what the mission file said. Jack wiped the sweat and dust from his forehead. That's when he heard it, a soft, quick giggle. It wasn't the sound of an echo or a broken machine. It was high-pitched, playful, and very close. He froze, scanning the area. The place looked empty, but he felt eyes watching him from behind an old supply crate. Something moved. Jack caught a flash of silver hair and two glowing eyes. A small figure stepped into the fading light. It was a girl, or something that looked like one. She was tiny, no more than 3 feet tall, with skin the color of pale moonlight. Her hair shimmered as if each strand was made of threads of light. Her eyes glowed softly, an unnatural, beautiful shade of blue. The girl tilted her head, studying him. "Slow human," she said with a smirk, her voice smooth and teasing. "You're taking forever to fix that thing." Jack blinked in surprise. He had expected maybe a wandering animal, but not this. "What? Who are you?" he asked. She only grinned wider, then stepped back into the shadows. By the time Jack moved toward her, she was gone. The wind howled through the outpost as the sky grew darker. Jack stood there for a long moment, wondering if his tired mind was playing tricks. But that giggle, it had been real. He packed up his tools, scanning the shadows as he walked back to his camp. Every now and then, he thought he saw movement, a blur of silver darting behind walls and broken machinery. By the time he reached his camp, night had fully settled. He lit the small camp heater and sat down with a ration pack. Just as he was about to take a bite, something rattled behind him. He spun around, nothing. Then a soft whisper came from the dark. "Too slow again, human." Jack's pulse quickened. "Show yourself," he called, but the only answer was that teasing laugh again. It seemed to come from everywhere at once. The next hour was a strange game of cat and mouse. He would hear a sound, turn quickly, and see nothing. Sometimes he caught a glimpse of her silver hair before she vanished again. It was as if she enjoyed seeing him confused. Jack couldn't decide if she was just curious, or if she was leading him somewhere. Finally, the camp grew quiet. Jack sat down again, feeling both frustrated and oddly intrigued. He had been on many alien worlds, but he had never met anyone like her, and her words, "slow human," they didn't sound like something a child would say. She spoke with confidence, like she knew more than she was telling. That night, Jack lay in his tent, staring at the thin fabric roof. Outside, the wind had died down, but in the silence, he could hear faint footsteps circling the tent, soft, light, and deliberate. Sometimes they stopped right outside the entrance. Jack held his breath. He could almost feel her presence just beyond the flap. But she never came inside. Instead, her voice floated through the still night air. "Maybe tomorrow, slow human," she whispered. And then there was silence. Jack didn't sleep much. His mind kept going back to those glowing eyes and that mocking smile. Who was she? Why was she here in an abandoned place? And why did it feel like she was testing him? When morning came, the sun lit up the camp. Jack stepped outside and stopped in his tracks. His tools were scattered across the ground, not stolen, just moved into strange patterns, and on the dirt, small footprints led away toward the old ruins beyond the ridge. Jack stared at them for a long time. A part of him wanted to ignore it, stick to his work and finish the job. But another part of him, the part that had heard her laugh and seen her vanish into the shadows, wanted to follow. He tightened his jacket and picked up his pack. The ruins waited in the distance, silent and mysterious. And somewhere out there, the tiny alien girl was watching. He didn't know it yet, but his life on this empty world had just changed forever. **. The morning air was crisp as Jack followed the trail of small footprints. They led over the ridge and down into a narrow valley where the sun barely touched the ground. The ruins rose ahead of him like broken teeth, jagged stone and twisted. Metal from another age. Jack paused at the edge. Scanning for movement, it was silent, except for the faint sound of running water somewhere deeper inside. He stepped carefully between the ancient walls. Every corner seemed to hold a shadow that could hide a small figure. Then he saw it, his wrench. The one he thought he had left at camp. It lay in the middle of the path, shiny and untouched. Jack bent to pick it up. "Too slow again, human," came that teasing voice from above. He looked up and spotted her crouched on a broken beam. Her legs were crossed, her silver hair falling over one shoulder. She was smiling like she owned the place. Jack took a step forward. "All right, little ghost, enough games, ghost." She laughed. "I'm not a ghost. I'm better than that." She jumped down lightly, landing without a sound. Jack noticed her feet, bare, with toes that had tiny claw-like tips. Definitely not human. "What's your name?" Jack asked. "Names are for friends," she replied, circling him slowly. "And you're not my friend, you're just slow," Jack sighed. "Then why keep following me?" She tilted her head. "Because you're new, and because you're interesting." In a clumsy way, she darted forward suddenly and snatched a small scanner from his belt. "Hey!" Jack grabbed for it, but she danced back, waving it in the air. "What's this do?" she asked, pressing buttons at random. "It tells me if something's broken," Jack replied. "And right now you're breaking my patience." She giggled, tossing it back to him. "I could help you." "You know," she said, almost seriously. "Help me how?" Jack asked. Her grin returned. "By showing you where the old things are. The things worth finding." Before he could reply, she turned and skipped toward a half-buried doorway. Jack followed, partly curious, partly worried she might get herself hurt. Inside, the air was cooler and smelled faintly of metal and dust. The walls glowed faintly with lines of old alien circuitry. She moved like she had been here 100 times before. Every now and then she glanced back to make sure he was following. They entered a chamber with a cracked floor and strange symbols carved into the walls. Jack knelt to examine them. "They tell stories," she said softly, her voice losing its teasing tone. "Stories about before the sky went dark." Jack looked at her. "How do you know that?" She shrugged. "I listen, I watch, I remember." Before Jack could ask more, she suddenly stiffened. Her ears, small, pointed, and almost hidden by her hair, twitched. She whispered. "Something's coming," from the shadows. At the far end of the chamber, a low growl echoed. Jack's hand went to the small sidearm on his belt. "What is it?" he asked. She backed toward him, her glowing eyes scanning the dark. "They hunt in packs," she said quietly. "And they don't like visitors." A shape emerged, tall, with long limbs and glistening black skin. Its mouth opened to reveal rows of jagged teeth. Two more shapes appeared behind it, moving slowly but with purpose. Jack raised his weapon, but the girl grabbed his wrist. "Not here," she hissed. "They'll hear more. Follow us." She pulled him toward another doorway. Jack fired once, the blast echoing through the ruins. The creatures hissed and charged. The girl leapt ahead, moving with impossible speed. Jack followed, heart pounding. They ran through twisting corridors, past collapsed walls and broken machinery. The growls grew closer. Finally, she slid into a narrow crack between two walls. Jack squeezed in after her, their shoulders pressed together in the dark. The creatures rushed past the entrance, missing them by inches. Jack could hear their claws scraping on the stone. They waited until the sounds faded. Only then did she step out into the open again. "You really are slow," she said with a smirk, but her breathing was quick. Jack studied her, realizing she was not just a playful troublemaker. She was a survivor, and maybe, just maybe, she knew far more about this place than she let on. As they made their way back toward the surface, she suddenly stopped. Turning to him, she said, "You can call me Lyra." Jack raised an eyebrow. "I thought names were for friends." She smiled faintly. Maybe you're getting there, human. When they stepped out into the sunlight, Jack realized he still didn't understand why she was here or what she wanted. But now she was walking beside him instead of hiding in the shadows, and that, somehow, felt like the beginning of something neither of them could predict. The midday sun burned through the thin clouds as Jack and Lyra made their way back toward the ruins. Jack had planned to continue repairing the Cum's tower, but Lyra had other ideas. She insisted there was something worth seeing deep inside. The old city, Jack didn't trust her completely, but after what happened with the predators earlier, he knew she wasn't just playing games anymore. They crossed a broken bridge that swayed under their weight. Below, a river rushed through jagged rocks, its water dark and cold. Lyra moved lightly across, as if she weighed nothing. Jack's boots slipped on the loose stones. "Slow, human," she teased again, but her voice was softer now when he reached the other side. She was waiting, arms folded, a little smirk on her lips. The deeper they went, the quieter it became. The air felt heavy, as if the ruins themselves were holding their breath. Old metal doors hung from twisted frames. Strange carvings covered the walls, symbols that seemed to glow faintly when Lyra passed her hand over them. Jack asked what they meant, but she didn't answer, only saying, "You wouldn't like the story." They entered a wide courtyard half buried in sand. In the center stood a towering structure made of black stone. Its surface shimmered faintly in the light, like oil on water. "This is it," Lyra said. Her voice serious. Jack stepped closer, running his fingers over the smooth surface. It was warm, too warm for stone in the shade. "What is it?" he asked. Lyra's gaze stayed on the shadows. "A door. To somewhere you don't want to go." Before Jack could ask more, a sharp metallic sound echoed from one of the side corridors. Lyra's ears twitched, and she turned slowly toward it. From the dark passage, a low growl rolled out, deeper and more menacing than before. Jack's hand went to his weapon. Lyra whispered, "We shouldn't be here." But before they could leave, a massive shape stepped into the light. It was one of the predators, but bigger, broader, its black skin marked with scars. Its eyes locked on them, and a deep rumble shook its chest. Two smaller ones emerged behind it, circling to cut off their escape. Lyra grabbed Jack's arm. "Don't shoot unless you have to." Jack frowned. "Why?" "Because sound brings more," she replied sharply. The creatures moved closer, their claws scraping on stone. Jack's mind raced. They were too far from the bridge to run. Lyra's eyes darted toward a narrow stairway leading down beneath the black stone structure. "Follow me," she said. Already moving, Jack hesitated, glancing at the door she had warned him about. But the predators were closing in, so he followed. They descended into a tunnel lit by faint strips of alien light. The air grew colder, carrying the scent of metal and something ancient. Behind them, claws clattered against stone. The predators had followed. Lyra pulled a small device from a pouch at her side. She pressed a button, and a shimmering wall of blue light appeared across the tunnel. The creatures stopped, just short of it, hissing and snapping. The barrier flickered as if it could fail at any moment. Jack caught his breath. "What is this place?" Lyra didn't answer right away. Instead, she looked at him with an expression he hadn't seen before, a mix of worry and regret. "This is where my people hid." "Before everything ended," she said quietly. Jack glanced around, seeing broken machines, shattered glass tubes, and strange skeletal remains. The silence felt heavier now. "Why bring me here?" he asked. "Because," she said, "if you're going to survive on this world, you need to know what hunts you, and why." Before Jack could reply, the barrier crackled violently. One of the predators slammed against it, and the blue light flared bright before dimming. Lyra's eyes widened. "It's failing." She grabbed Jack's hand and pulled him deeper into the tunnels. They passed rooms filled with alien artifacts, glowing crystals, and strange weapons mounted on the walls. Jack wanted to stop and examine them, but Lyra didn't slow down. They finally reached a circular chamber with a single shaft of light. Pouring down from above, in the center lay a massive stone disc covered in more of those glowing symbols. Lyra knelt and placed her hand on it. The symbols flared brighter, and a low hum filled the chamber. "What are you doing?" Jack asked. "Trying to keep us alive," she replied. The hum grew louder, and the walls of the chamber began to shift. Panels slid open to reveal long, curved blades and devices that looked like alien traps. Jack realized they were inside a defensive mechanism. The predators reached the doorway just as the traps activated. Sharp spikes shot out, forcing them back. They hissed in frustration but didn't retreat completely. "They'll wait," Lyra said grimly. "They always wait." Jack looked at her, breathing hard. "You brought me here to see this, or to trap me?" he asked. Her eyes flashed. "If I wanted you dead, human, you'd already be dead." She turned away, gazing toward the dark tunnels. "This isn't a game anymore," she said softly. "They won't stop until one of us is gone." Jack didn't know whether to believe her completely. But one thing was clear: whatever strange game Lyra had been playing before, the danger was now very real, and for the first time, Jack wondered if spending another night here might mean not seeing the morning. The chamber's humming faded into silence. Only the distant growl of the predators echoed from the tunnels. Beyond, Jack leaned against the stone wall, catching his breath. Lyra stood in the center of the room, her silver hair glowing faintly in the shaft of light. For the first time since he met her, she wasn't smirking or teasing. Her eyes looked distant, like she was staring at something far away in her mind. Jack broke the silence. "All right, Lyra. It's time you tell me what's going on." She glanced at him, her lips pressed in a thin line. "You wouldn't believe me," she said quietly. "Try me," Jack replied. His voice firm, she hesitated, then walked toward one of the side walls. Her fingers traced the glowing carvings like she was touching something precious. "This place," she began, "was once my home. Not just mine, but my people's." Jack frowned. "I thought you said the village was destroyed." "It was," she said. "But before that, before everything fell apart, this underground city was alive." Her voice softened. "We had light, warmth, music, and no predators." Jack stepped closer, listening. Lyra's gaze stayed on the carvings. "My people were small, like me, but we were builders, thinkers. We created machines that kept us safe from the storms, from the beasts, from everything outside." She took a breath, her hand trembling slightly. "But safety makes people forget how to fight." Jack stayed silent, letting her speak. "One day, the predators found a way in. They didn't just come to feed, they came to destroy." Her voice grew quieter. "I was just a child. My parents hid me in one of the upper vents before the walls fell." Jack felt a tightness in his chest. "What happened to them?" he asked. Lyra's eyes flickered with pain. "I never saw them again." She turned away from the wall and walked toward the center of the chamber. "For a while, I thought I was the only one left," she continued. "I learned to hide too. Move fast, to take what I needed to survive." A faint smile crossed her lips, though it didn't reach her eyes. "And I learned it was easier to keep people away, by making them think I was just a pest." Jack understood now. The teasing, the games, the way she disappeared whenever he got close. It wasn't just mischief. It was armor. And now? Jack asked, "Why stay here if it's so dangerous?" Lyra's gaze hardened. "Because this is my home. Even if it's broken, even if I'm the last one." The predators snarled again from the shadows outside the chamber. Lyra didn't flinch. "They've been here since that night," she said, "generation after generation, feeding, breeding. They've claimed the surface and the ruins above, but this place, this room, they can't take it. Not completely." Jack crossed his arms. "And you've been living here all this time alone?" Lyra shrugged. "Not entirely alone. Sometimes scavengers come, sometimes off-worlders like you. Most don't last long." Her eyes softened slightly. "You're the first to make it this far without running. Jack couldn't tell if that was a compliment or a warning. "So what now?" he asked. Lyra walked over to a small alcove and pulled out a metal container. Inside were rations, a few tools, and something that looked like a small alien crystal. She tossed the container to him. "You eat, you rest. Then we figure out how to get you out of here alive." Jack raised an eyebrow. "You're not coming with me." Her eyes narrowed. "I don't leave. Why not?" "Because if I go, this place will fall," she said simply. Jack frowned. "It's just a room, Lyra." Her voice was sharp. "It's not just a room. It's the heart of my people's work, and if it dies, everything we were will be forgotten." The weight of her words hung in the air. Jack saw the stubbornness in her eyes, the same stubbornness he'd seen when she teased him, when she darted into danger, when she refused to run from predators. This wasn't just about survival for her, it was about holding on to the last piece of a world she had lost. They sat in silence for a while, eating from their separate packs. The low hum of the chamber's energy systems was the only sound. Finally Jack spoke. "You know, you don't have to fight alone." Lyra didn't look at him, but her voice was softer when she replied, "Maybe. But I don't know how to let someone else in." For the first time, Jack smiled faintly. "Well, you've let me this far," he said. "That's a start." Lyra's lips curved into the smallest of smiles before she quickly looked away. In the dim light, her silver hair shimmered like starlight. And for a brief moment, the teasing girl and the lonely survivor seemed like the same person. But outside, the predators waited. And Jack knew the night ahead would test both of them in ways they weren't ready for. The hum of the chambers. Walls was steady, but Lyra's ears twitched as if she could hear something beneath it. Jack noticed her glance toward the tunnel entrance, the faint glow of her eyes reflecting the darkness beyond. "What is it?" he asked. She didn't answer right away. Then she whispered, "The wind. It's changing." Jack frowned. "Wind?" "We're underground." Lyra shook her head. "Not that kind of wind. This is the kind that comes before the shadow storm." The way she said it made the hairs on the back of Jack's neck rise. "What's a shadow storm?" Lyra's gaze hardened. "You'll see. If we're unlucky." A deep rumble rolled through the ground, faint at first, then growing stronger. Dust drifted from the ceiling, and the glowing lines on the walls flickered. Lyra grabbed a pack from the alcove and tossed it to Jack. "We have to move now." Jack tightened the straps and followed her out of the chamber. The predators were gone, but their absence didn't feel like safety. It felt like a warning. They moved through the ruins quickly, Lyra guiding him down twisting corridors and over piles of fallen stone. The rumble grew into a distant roar. Jack could feel the vibration in his boots, like the ground itself was alive. "What's causing it?" he asked. Lyra didn't look back. "When the storms come, they bring more than wind and dust. They bring darkness that moves." They emerged into the open air, and Jack finally saw it on the horizon. A wall of swirling black clouds was racing toward them, blotting out the sky. But it wasn't just clouds. The shadows inside the storm twisted and shifted like living things. Every few seconds, sharp flashes of pale light lit up shapes within the darkness, shapes that moved against the wind. Jack stared. "What in hell is that?" Lyra's voice was tense. "Hunters. Bigger than the predators below." "Bigger?" Jack asked, still watching the storm. "They ride the winds, feeding on anything caught outside. They'll strip a body to the bone in minutes." A gust of cold wind slammed into them, carrying the scent of metal and rot. Lyra pulled Jack toward a narrow path leading up a jagged slope. "There's a dome near the top. It's the only place that can hold against the storm," she shouted over the growing roar. The climb was brutal, the wind pushing them sideways. Loose rocks slid under Jack's boots, and more than once, Lyra had to grab his arm to steady him. She moved with the same light steps as before, but now there was no teasing, only urgency. Halfway up, Jack risked a glance back. The storm was closer now, the shadows inside stretching long, claw-like shapes toward the ground. A sudden shriek cut through the roar. High, piercing, and far too close, Lyra stopped, scanning the air. From the edge of the storm, a dark shape broke free, swooping low toward them. It was huge. With wings like tattered sails and a mouth lined with curved fangs, Jack drew his weapon, but Lyra shoved it down. No sound you'll call more. The creature circled once, then dove again. Lyra grabbed a handful of loose stones and hurled them at its head. One struck the side of its skull, making it veer off. "Run!" She shouted, and they scrambled up the last stretch of the slope. The dome came into view, an ancient, half-buried structure of glass and metal. Its entrance was narrow, just wide enough for them to slip through. They collapsed inside as the wind howled past. Outside, the storm hit the slope with a deafening roar. Shadows slammed against the dome's glass, their shapes writhing and clawing as if trying to get in. Jack pressed his back to the wall, staring at them. They can't break through, right? Lyra's silence wasn't comforting. "They've never broken through before," she said. "But this storm, it feels different." The glass shook violently as something massive slammed into it. A jagged crack appeared near the top. Lyra's eyes narrowed. "If that breaks, we won't have time to run." Jack scanned the dome's interior, spotting a stack of heavy crates. Together, they dragged them under the crack, hoping to reinforce it. The storm raged for what felt like hours. The shadows never stopped pressing against the glass. Their shapes were unnatural, twisting in ways Jack's mind didn't want to understand. Every so often, one of them let out a low, hungry moan that vibrated in his bones. Finally, the wind began to fade, and the darkness outside started to thin. The shadows slipped back into the retreating storm, leaving only silence behind. Jack let out a breath he didn't realize he'd been holding. Lyra sat against the wall, her knees drawn up, for the first time. She looked tired. "That," she said quietly, "is why I don't sleep outside." Jack gave a humorless chuckle. "Yeah, I'm starting to see why." But in his mind, one thought kept repeating. If storms like this could happen at any time, survival here was a lot more complicated than he'd imagined. And as he looked at Lyra, he realized something else. No matter how dangerous she said it was to stay, she had no intention of leaving, which meant, if he wanted to live, he had no intention of leaving her. The storm outside had passed, but the night it left behind felt heavier. The air inside the dome was still intense. Jack sat near the cracked glass, his weapon resting on his lap. Lyra moved quietly along the walls, checking every seam and corner as if expecting something to slip through. "You think they'll come back?" Jack asked. Lyra didn't look at him. "They always do," he frowned. "You mean the storm?" She shook her head. "The predators. They hunt after storms. The wind hides their scent and sound." That explained why she was on edge. The thought of those black-skinned creatures climbing up the slope in the dark made Jack grip his weapon tighter. The only light came from faint alien strips running along the dome's walls. Outside, the moon was hidden, leaving the world in a shadowy gloom. Lyra returned to sit across from him, sliding a small pack between them. Inside were dried fruit, a sealed water pouch, and something that looked like hard bread. Jack took a piece, biting into it with a crunch. It was dry and bland, but after the day they'd had, it tasted like a feast. They ate in silence, the only sound the faint hum of the dome's old systems. After a while, Jack spoke again. "You ever think about leaving this place? Going somewhere safer?" Lyra's expression didn't change. "This is my place. I know its dangers, I know its paths. Out there I'd just be prey." Jack studied her for a moment. "And you'd rather fight alone?" She met his eyes. "I've always fought alone." Something about the way she said it made Jack think she wasn't just talking about the predators. Before he could ask more, a faint scratching sound came from outside. Both of them froze. The scratching grew louder, followed by a deep, low growl. Lyra's eyes flickered toward the door. "They found us," she whispered. Jack moved to the entrance, peering through a narrow slit in the dim light. He saw movement, 3 of the predators were circling the dome, their bodies low, their claws clicking on the stone. One stopped and sniffed the air, its head turning toward the entrance. Jack stepped back, his heart thudding. "They're testing us," Lyra said. "Seeing if we're weak." Jack loaded his weapon, but Lyra caught his wrist. "If you shoot, more will come," she said. "We have to make them think we're not worth the risk." Jack looked around the dome. "And how do we do that?" Lyra moved to a small control panel on the wall, brushing away years of dust. She pressed a sequence of symbols, and the dome's outer lights flared to life, bathing the slope in a harsh white glow. The predators froze, their eyes narrowing against the sudden brightness. One hissed and backed away, but another stepped forward. Stubborn, Lyra's voice was low. "If they stay too long, they'll adapt." "We need noise," Jack grinned faintly. "Noise I can do." He picked up a long metal rod from the corner and slammed it against the floor. The sound echoed through the dome and out into the night. The predators flinched, retreating toward the shadows, but they didn't leave completely. Hours passed like that, the creatures pacing outside. Jack and Lyra taking turns making noise and keeping the lights bright. In the quiet moments between, they spoke in low voices. Jack told her about Earth, about the forests and oceans, about the cities that never slept. Lyra listened, her usual smirk replaced by a thoughtful look. "I've never seen a tree," she admitted. "Only the dead ones. Black and brittle after the storms." Jack smiled faintly. "If we get out of here, I'll show you a real one." Her gaze lingered on him for a moment. Then she looked away. "You're strange. Human," she said softly. "Most just run." Near midnight, the predators made their boldest move. One leapt onto the dome, claws scraping against the glass. The crack from the storm groaned under the weight. Jack raised his weapon, but Lyra had already moved, grabbing one of the alien devices from the wall. She aimed it upward and fired. A pulse of blue light struck the creature, sending it tumbling down the slope with a shriek. The others hesitated, then melted back into the darkness. Silence settled over the dome again, but neither of them relaxed. "They'll be back," Lyra said, her voice tired. Jack nodded. "Then so will we." They sat near the wall, side by side now instead of across from each other. Lyra's head tilted slightly toward him, her eyes half closed. Jack could feel the warmth of her small frame beside him. For the first time since he arrived on this planet, the fear in his chest eased just a little. Maybe it was because of the danger outside, or maybe it was because of her. Either way, he knew one thing. When the sun rose, their fight wasn't over. But at least for tonight, they weren't fighting it alone. The first light of dawn crept over the jagged horizon. Its pale glow touched the dome's cracked glass, making it shimmer faintly. Jack opened his eyes slowly, the stiffness in his back reminding him he'd slept sitting against the wall. Beside him, Lyra was already awake, her gaze fixed on the slope outside. She looked calm, but Jack could see the tension in the way her fingers tapped against her knee. "They're gone," she said softly. Jack followed her eyes. The slope was empty, no black shapes moving in the shadows. Only the wind stirred the dust now. "Maybe they got tired," he muttered, stretching his sore arms. Lyra shook her head. "Predators don't get tired. They get cautious, and that's worse." He stood and walked to the narrow entrance, peering out. The sky was a pale gray blue, the air sharp and cold. The silence felt unnatural, like the ruins were holding their breath. Lyra joined him, her silver hair catching the morning light. "This is the time they like to strike," she warned. "When you think it's safe." They moved carefully down the slope, keeping low. Jack's boots crunched on the loose stones, each step echoing too loudly in the stillness. Halfway down, Lyra raised a hand, signaling him to stop. She crouched low, scanning the rocks ahead. Jack followed her gaze. A dark shape lay sprawled near the base of the slope. It was one of the predators, its black skin torn, its body still. "That's the one you knocked off the dome," Jack said. Lyra nodded. It's dead. The others will smell it. Her voice was steady, but there was no triumph in it. Death here was just another warning. They skirted around the body, heading for the edge of the ruins. The Cums Tower was still in the distance, silent and waiting. Jack glanced at Lyra. If we get that working, I can call for pickup. She looked away. And then you'll leave. Jack slowed his steps. You want me to stay? Lyra didn't answer right away. Finally, she said, You're different, human. You don't just run, you fight. And you listen. Her eyes flicked toward him. It's been a long time since I had anyone to talk to. They reached the base of the Cums Tower. The metal frame groaned in the morning wind. Jack set his pack down and began climbing. Checking each bolt and cable, Lyra stayed below, scanning the ruins with a watchful gaze. Every now and then, she would glance up at him, as if making sure he was still there. When Jack reached the main panel, he saw the damage was worse than he thought. Half the circuits were fried, probably from the last shadow storm. But with some time he could fix it. He worked quickly, his hands moving with practiced precision. Below, Lyra paced slowly, her claws clicking softly on the stone. An hour later, he climbed down, wiping sweat from his brow. It's ready, he said. Once I send the signal, we've got a window before the next storm. Lyra tilted her head. And then? Jack hesitated. Then? I could ask them to bring you too. She stared at him, her expression unreadable. You think I'd fit in your world, human? She asked quietly. Jack shrugged. I think you'd survive anywhere. Maybe even better than me. A faint smile touched her lips, but it faded quickly. This is my home, she said. I can't leave it. Not yet. Jack didn't press her. Instead, he set the signal to transmit, the tower's light flashing steadily, somewhere far above. A relay would catch the pulse and send it toward orbit. Help was on the way. But as Jack looked at Lyra, standing with the ruins behind her and the rising sun catching her silver hair, he wondered if leaving felt like help at all. They walked back toward the dome together. The predators didn't appear, though Lyra's eyes kept flicking to the shadows. When they reached the entrance, she stopped. This is where we part, she said. Jack frowned. You're just going to let me walk away? Lyra's smirk returned, faint but real. You're slow, human. But not slow enough to die here. Jack stepped closer. You could come. You'd never have to fight alone again. Her voice was steady, but her eyes betrayed her. And if I go, who will remember this place? Who will guard it? He knew she was right. This was her world, her fight, and no rescue ship could change that. For a moment, they just stood there, the wind tugging at their clothes. Finally, Jack reached into his pack and pulled out a small metal pendant. It was dull and scratched, but it had been his for years. He pressed it into her hand. Something to remember me by, he said. Lyra looked at it, then at him, her lips parting as if to speak, but she only nodded. Jack turned and walked toward the ridge where the rescue would find him. Halfway up, he glanced back. Lyra was still there, standing in the doorway of the dome. The morning light wrapped around her small frame like a halo. She raised her hand in a silent farewell, and for the first time since he arrived on this planet, Jack realized he wasn't leaving it the same man who had landed. As the wind carried the distant hum of the Cums Tower, Jack knew one thing. No matter how far he traveled, he would never forget the tiny alien girl who teased him, tested him, and somehow made him stay alive through the longest night of his life.